Welcome to First Star Let's Chat, an athletic therapy podcast. I'm your host, James Gardner, certified athletic therapist, certified strength and conditioning specialist, yoga instructor, human being. This platform, for the pros, by the pros, anybody in the performance space, and beyond. Welcome here to share in the stories of professionals, experiences, journeys, learning along the way. It's a platform to connect, to network, and to be a part of a community that cares, with conversations that matter, experiences that resonate, and generate ideas, thought-provoking, organic dialogue, passionate pros. Brought to you as always by First Star Therapy, Mobility Tape, Epic, and Benchmark Athletics, in association with the Canadian Athletic Therapists Association. It's First Star Let's Chat, an athletic therapy podcast. Thanks for being here. Thank you for being a part of it. All right, we are live from the exhibit hall at WFATT 2022 in Winnipeg, Manitoba. Our guest this morning, Dr. Thomas Buckley. We'll get to his background in a minute, but we are here in Winnipeg again for the World Congress with WFATT, which is made up of 42 member associations, 12 countries, 4 continents, and over 50,000 practitioners as athletic therapists and athletic trainers. Again, our guest this morning, Dr. Thomas Buckley, who is presenting here on some research that we'll learn about here shortly. He is an associate professor of athletic training in the Department of Kinesiology and Applied Physiology at the University of Delaware, where he conducts concussion-related research and co-directs the university's involvement in the NCAA DoD Grand Alliance CARE consortium. Dr. Thomas Buckley, appreciate you being here, appreciate your time, and I'll throw it over to you to say hello.
Well, good morning. Thank you. It's been a pleasure to be here.
Great. And we're just talking to practitioners. We are talking to everybody who's here at the conference. What is WFATT to you? Why are you here? And what value does this bring to our community?
Well, good. Well, this is my first time coming to WFATT, so it's been a great experience so far. Met some good people and had some good initial conversations here. I think it's always important for us to work to kind of bridge the research side and the clinician side. You know, as a researcher, sometimes we can get very in our own heads and doing work that's simply not practical or applied to the people who actually work for a living. And so it's always great to come back and meet with clinicians and talk to them about things that can work in their settings.
Absolutely. And this is my background as a practitioner working in the sports space specifically. And the application of the research is sometimes a little tricky. It's tricky to navigate. So what do you advise, or how do you go about delivering your research to make it usable for practitioners like myself?
So my background is athletic training. I worked as clinical athletic trainer for a number of years before I went up to the dark side and became a researcher. How do I keep it to be clinically applicable as I try and think about? So I have a good working relationship with our athletic trainers at the University of Delaware. And so a lot of times when we're in the process of really creating a new research project or trying to find a new look at something, I sit and talk with them and I say, so we do this. Is this something you can actually do every day? And so we work very closely with them right now with our post-concussion student athletes. And so you go to implement things. There's things I've wanted to implement where they just say, pull the stop sign up and say, yeah, that's just not going to work. I can't do that. And we're an institution, we're lucky. We have 15 certified athletic trainers working full-time in athletics. And if they can't do it, then certainly the local high school or the small college can't do it either. And so I think really keeping one foot in each world is very helpful to be able to make sure things actually work.
Yeah, absolutely. And so the practical application piece is massive, and the go back or the go between, understanding how this research is applicable and how to apply it. And if it doesn't work, then finding ways to make it work in those settings and be relatable moving forward. So really cool stuff. So how did this journey begin for you into the athletic training space and then sort of into concussion?
Sure. So it's kind of a funny backstory. I'm one of those cases of when I say I'm not going to do something, that's usually what I do. So I started college as a history major and I changed. I didn't want to be a teacher. Now I'm a college professor. And I went to athletic training because I didn't want to be a person who sat behind a desk and wore a button-down shirt all day. And now I sit behind a desk, typing on a computer, wearing a button-down shirt all day. So I'm not sure what comes next. But so I started teaching and really enjoyed it. And I went on to get a doctoral degree because I wanted to run an athletic training program, never wanted to be a researcher. So here I am running a research program and not running an athletic training program. And my dissertation work was actually in Parkinson's disease. We were looking at exercise interventions and gait characteristics and quality of life in Parkinson's disease patients. And to surprise probably absolutely no one listening to this podcast, exercise works because exercise pretty much always works. And we saw really great improvements in their ability to be mobile and be able to move around their community. And then I went down, I took a faculty position at Georgia Southern University. And long story short, there were no Parkinson patients in the area. And so this was mid 2000s, and concussion was starting to pick up a lot. And so I started reading on it. And while Parkinson's and concussions are obviously very, very different situations, they're both central neurological brain-related pathologies. And so I said, I wonder what happens if I took the gait and posture battery I was using in my Parkinson patients and started using concussion patients. And that's what we did, and that's kind of how I got started into the concussion side. So I'm doing now. I started around 2007. So I'm about 15 years into doing this, and yeah. So we started with gait and posture, and now we do a wide variety of testing batteries in different populations.
Amazing, and research that matters. Obviously, across the board, Parkinson's. Definitely. And then in the athletic space as well with concussion, there's a lot out there in terms of concussion. Everybody's generating sort of data and interest and in the practical application of concussion management. What is a concussion? We still experience this idea of symptom-driven characteristics as to what a concussion is. If nothing shows up physically, we can't see the injury, but we hear about it from patients from a symptomatic standpoint. What have your findings been with sort of your research in terms of the physical presentation of concussion? Is there any uniformity to any of this, or is it an individual case-by-case basis? Your take on that?
Okay, so a lot there, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So first, we still get the student athlete who comes into us and says, well, I got a concussion over the summer, went to the ER, they took an x-ray of my head and said, I don't have a concussion.
Still there, still happening. Yeah.
And you're like, okay, well, let's good luck with that one. And so, yeah, the misunderstandings, while they've improved dramatically, it's nowhere near what the misconceptions out there a decade or 2 decades ago. But we do a lot of work to educate our student athletes as to what concussion is. And I think the athletes nowadays, for the most part, are generally aware. So a lot of our research right now, we have a number of different lines. One of them is we do skate and posture battery again. And so, you made a great comment there that concussions are, of course, individual. And, there's an old saying out there, I think Stan Harrington was the first one I heard say, I don't know if he came up with it or not, but if you've seen one concussion, you've seen exactly one concussion. So the next one's going to look different.
Absolutely.
And so that's certainly true. Symptoms obviously drive a lot of it. So a lot of the work we've done in our gait protocol is, we're able to use a pretty objective measure. The nice thing about gait is, you develop when you're a kid, so about 8, 10, maybe 12 years old tops, your gait pattern is pretty well established as who you are. And it's going to stay that way for decades, barring some other substantial outside influence. You break your leg, et cetera, then it'll change. But where a lot of the current tests that I use, they have a big practice effect to them. So a lot of listeners might be familiar with the balance error scoring system. So it's a good assessment to identify concussion acutely. The challenge is student athletes, because they're so physically fit and they're so neurologically adept, they get better at that task just from redoing it. And so even though they're still acutely symptomatic, they may be better than their baseline just because, in our case, they're Division I college athletes. And so they can balance on one foot really, really well. And the nice with the gait stuff is that it's a much more stable measure. And so our changes that we see do persist for a period of time. One of my colleagues named David Howell's out in Colorado right now. He's demonstrated gait changes 2 months post-concussion.
Wow. Okay.
We had a paper that came out about a year or so ago where we looked at gait initiation, which is actually really how you start to walk. Something you don't think about every day. You start walking. But we can look at the actual kinematics and kinetics of starting to walk. And we found change. We measured the clinical data. So we looked at when the person passed the best test, when they passed impact, when they were symptom-free, when they returned to play. And we found deficits across all those time points. So I think there's pretty good evidence right now, and this is what we're presenting on today at WFATT, that there are deficits still present in athletes even when they pass the clinical.
Right.
And that transition is kind of what we're talking about today at the conference, which is subsequent musculoskeletal injury. And so we see about 2-fold elevated risk of a person getting a lower extremity injury in the year following concussion, as compared to we match the teammates. So we match, in hockey, we'll match a winger to a winger, or in football, linebacker to a linebacker. And those concussions are more risk, not before they get hurt, but after they get a concussion.
Yeah, and these are things that we need to understand from that standpoint as well. We look at any number of general topics when it comes to injury and injury, quote unquote, prevention or deterrence. Fatigue, massive factor in injury. Previous injury, massive factor in injury or predicting of injury. And so the concussion piece having lingering effects for upwards of months or a year, interesting, and more needs to obviously be poured into those areas to understand that. And for us in the practical side, what do we need to do in that year following the concussion to understand the gait, the posture, and these kinds of things? So I just want to bring that back in terms of baseline testing. Baseline testing with concussion. Not everybody has tools to measure gait or posture, or do they? Is there something simple that people can do with athletes to have a baseline, or is it worthwhile to have a baseline for each individual?
So that's an ongoing challenge right now, and it's not just a tools issue; it's the manpower, right? Number of people you need to do this. So we'll baseline test 150 to 200 student athletes a year at the University of Delaware. That takes about 2 hours per kid. You do the math. That's a lot of work.
Yeah,
we have a research staff that does that. The average high school, the average small college, of course, can't do it. What we're looking at right now, so we think gait is a very effective measure, but we also recognize the clinical impracticality of that. And so we're doing a lot of work now with tandem gait. And so tandem gait requires almost nothing. It's a piece of tape, which every athletic trainer, athletic therapist has, 3 meters long. You lay it down, you have them walk up and back it, heel to toe, you time it. So it's a very simple test any clinician can do, costs nothing, literally.
Right.
And it's not quite as sensitive as gait is, but it's pretty sensitive, and it certainly has a higher sensitivity than the best test does. One of my former students, Dr. Oldham, who's also here at WFATT today.
Yeah, and we'll actually have her on the podcast too, so appreciate that. Yeah.
She published a paper in MedSci a couple of years ago. We did sensitivity specificity analysis and found tandem gait dramatically outperform the best test. Okay. The other thing we do with that, it's again still clinically feasible, but a little more challenging. We do what we do is called dual task. And so dual task is, can you walk and chew gum at the same time? And so what we do is we give them a series of working memory questions where it might be subtraction by 7. So I say to you, I'm going to give you a number, and when you start walking, I want you to subtract 7 from that number repeatedly. And then we time them on how long it takes them to do it. And we also assess their cognitive performance, just a very simple scoring system. We make sure we always have the answers ourselves because we're not always invested in some of these questions. And you look at the performance change. And so the average person who's healthy, their performance will decrease a little bit usually on the time, but their cognitive stays similar. Following concussion, we usually see that both go down dramatically. So they walk a lot slower and their ability to answer the question is worse. And that will linger also across time. And so it's a very simple thing, piece of paper, a pen, and it used to be the hardest thing was finding a stopwatch. Now we all have it on our cell phones.
That's it.
And so that's what we're doing in terms of clinical translation on that.
Okay, beautiful. And again, it comes back around to practicality, application, and you touched on it at the beginning of this. You touched on it again with your work and how you're utilizing baselines. And I think for me as a practitioner, not a researcher, that's massive. So that people are on the ground with the athletes and for the athletes and in the best interest of best care practices, to understand how to do things practically, simply, and not taking those massive time points or a whole lot of technology to do it. You do have to have athletes who can subtract by 7, which is an important piece. It may not be all of the athletes, but even on a good day, a practitioner can't do that. So, and that brings up a really important point, I think, as well in the performance space, in human space, dual task. Like there aren't too many people that are single task oriented all the time. So baselining for the norm and after concussion makes a ton of sense, right? So the dual task is critical.
So one thing you talk about a lot is that, and we have conversations with coaches and sport performance folks on this, is if I can find a deficit in your student athlete when they're in my lab, quiet, with nothing else going around them, and they're moving differently during a dual task. What happens when we're out there, a wide receiver in football, and they're looking at head on a swivel, looking to see a linebacker trying to kill them, what safety trying to decapitate them, and run really fast, and try and catch a football. If they can't walk them on my lab, I guarantee you they can't do that. And so that's the performance side of it. And then the injury side, kind of circling back to what we're talking about, is again, we think those deficits if you think about from the ankle sprain literature or from the ACL literature, these injuries are occurring in milliseconds. And it's a very small change in performance that is between an ankle sprain and not having an ankle sprain, between tearing your ACL and not tearing your ACL. And again, if I can find that change in your performance in a simple level overground dual test gait protocol lab, then that's going to magnify dramatically out on the field.
Absolutely. And then you take the environment of this massive, constantly evolving external environment that you touched on as well. Things are happening at rapid speed. Other players or other athletes competing, these kinds of things, and even here having this conversation in the exhibit hall at a conference. There's a lot of people moving by. There's we have all the sponsors and everybody in here, and a great event. But to have the opportunity to have this conversation with you and still be able to sort of harness some of that, be able to focus on the thing that you're doing, and me hopefully not losing my track and talking about it. There's a lot that goes into being a human being. And there's a lot of variables that go into being obviously an athlete or a college athlete or somebody who's working their way through the day-to-day tasks. So this is important research. This obviously is critical to help moving the dial forward on this. Where do you want to take the research? Where do you see your research going? And how is it going to be applied here at WFATT at the conference today? How is it going to be delivered?
Yeah, it's funny you say we the rock tape table behind us. I'm listening to them talk to their customers, and while we're doing the interview here,
exactly.
So I'm finding myself just a cognitive challenge from time to time. And anyone knows me knows I can talk about my research forever on stuff. So where we're going forward here, so we've identified these deficits. We know there are minor posture control deficits that are present beyond clinical recovery. We know there's elevated injury risk. So the natural next question is, can we prevent them? What can we do to try and prevent these injuries? And we know injury prevention programs are very difficult to implement. We know they are, the adherence to them isn't always great. And so there's a study that's come out just recently and talked about today that did show that you do essentially an ACL style injury prevention program on neuromuscular training.
Yep.
It did reduce the injury rate post concussion in a high school population.
Okay.
And the study had some limitations. But it was the first study. It was a great study for what it was. I think it's very promising. And it makes sense that if you take a person with a deficit and you train them away from that deficit, they get better. So we're working with our sports performance team at the University of Delaware, the athletic trainers, the strength and conditioning coaches, and we're getting very involved in the actual workouts they're doing and trying to identify who's really at risk. We have a recent grant we got from NIH, which we're trying to do is create what we call a composite score. So people are familiar with composite scores. They do if they take the impact test for concussion, where you take a number of scores, whole number of subtests, and come up with one kind of score. And so what we're trying to do is create a risk profile for who's most likely to get injured. Because it's hard to take every person with concussion and run them through an injury prevention program.
Right.
So can we find those most at risk of subsequent injury? And the goal, again, kind of maintaining the theme of our talk today about being clinically feasible, is can we come up with a score system from 0 to 1, 0 to 5, or something along those lines? We can then categorize. This is the top tier, 20-25% will most likely get injured. And this is the bottom tier at 25% least likely to get injured. And so we're pulling information from our concussion battery. We're pulling information from their medical histories, their prior injuries. Because of course, as you mentioned, what's the top risk of getting hurt? Getting hurt before.
Right.
Who's going to sprain their ankle? The person sprained their ankle before. And then also looking at their sport performance. So we have GPS tracking we use on student athletes, and also looking at their workout performance. Are their workouts deteriorating? Are there certain aspects of the workouts? And so by trying to bring this all together under one kind of statistical model that we can then spit out a number or a red light, yellow light, green light type system for clinicians to say, hey, this person, they're really pretty high risk right now. Can we try and dial them back some? And versus other person that, their risk is pretty low. The challenge always in injury prevention is you can never track an injury that didn't happen.
Yeah, this is it.
And so, and if you talk about, okay, well, even with a soccer team, you might get 2 ACLs a year. That's a bad year, obviously. But if you have one next year, is that because the injury prevention training program worked? Or is that just because some years you have one? And so it might take 5 or 7 years to say, well, we should have had 12 ACL injuries. We only had 6. Well, that's a huge reduction. And if you think about what an ACL is, not just from the clinician's point of view, from the patient's point of view, it's a year of their life. It's surgery, it's rehab. Anyone who's dealt with ACL patients knows that first 2, 3, 4 weeks post ACL is miserable. It's painful. They lose work time. They may have restrictions in class time, and their quality of life goes down. So each one of those you prevent is an enormous gain, both athletically and personally. But again, it's really hard to measure the ACL didn't happen.
Right, and I think this is the part that I guess I've maybe wrestled with or competed with my whole career as a practitioner. Is you're constantly drilled by how can we prevent injury, but again, that injury that didn't happen can't be prevented. You talk on a whole bunch of great stuff, and I don't want to keep you here all day. We will do this again, and we can do this at length, ad nauseum. We want to keep these ones a little bit short here. It is the exhibit hall here at the Congress is starting to clear out for the next presentation. But you talk about NMTs or neuromuscular training programs, and we know things from ACL, ankle, these kind of things. And there's been a lot of talk to the sports space as to why is a concussion treated differently than anything else. I mean, it's a brain injury, it's a systemic injury. So obviously there is some catastrophizing of that. There's some realities to that it's not an ankle, it's not a knee. But we're talking about neuromuscular training programs for concussion. This is brilliant. This is treat the body with movement, treat the body with exercise, with stimulus, the deficits we've talked about. I just think it's important to hammer those pieces home from practical sense. When is the best time? And again, it's individual, so I don't want this to be a blanket statement. It sounds like it may be. Is there a best time in the concussion recovery to introduce the neuromuscular training?
So, yeah, so I want to hear a couple different things there. There is that conversation. Why do we have a protocol for concussion? It's kind of COVID come up right now. So many overlaps between COVID and concussion from both misinformation and misunderstanding and everything. And part of the discussion we have with that is, well, a knee replacement is not fun. It is not a goal to have. We have knee replacement surgery. Right. We don't have brain replacement surgery. Right. I might know a few folks who benefit from it, but that's not the point.
Maybe those ones that can't subtract by 7.
Exactly.
Yep.
And there's obviously, and this goes beyond this podcast, but there's a lot of discussion of the long-term effects of concussions, repetitive head impacts, and what may or may not happen later on in life. And because that's a complex story. That's obviously, and we are doing work in that space, and we can talk later about that another time.
Yep.
When do we put the neuromuscular training in? That's a challenging point. I think we're looking at exercise right now as an intervention with concussion to improve recovery. And what we've shown, others have shown, is that I think John Lay's work at post-concussion syndrome, exercise is wonderful. Again, not surprising. What we've gone to a lot of is really a sub-symptom threshold exercise. So we'll get you going and, start off with some things that's simple, like walking on a treadmill or riding a bike. And if your symptoms go up, you stop. If they don't, you keep going. And we will tell you may have a little bit of leeway. So, if your headache goes up a smidgen, that's a very scientific term, then that's okay. We don't want you to, if your symptoms start to nobody works while you're doing it, then stop what you're doing.
2 smidgens, no good.
Yeah,
1 smidgen.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah.
Perfect science, right? And journals all love that terminology. And so we noticed, just going back almost 10 years now, we published a study that, actually the data was 10 years ago, that the athletes who weren't listening to us, and we're still being active in those first couple of days, we're actually getting better a little faster than those athletes who were listening to us and were doing back in the day was like that cave treatment, right? Where you went in cocoon therapy and just sat in your room, no phone, no TV, and you can't imagine why that mental health scores go worse. And so being active, being involved, being out in society, we're still not having the kids go to calculus class for the first couple of days. We're still not having the kid out running practices. This idea of like black and white activity is kind of silly, right? It's not like run a marathon or sit in your house. There's a pretty wide range of activities in between there. And so that kind of goes back to what I was saying, we kind of do a sub-symptom, let's build it up. Yep. If you're doing this, then it's okay. Tomorrow we'll do more. If it's not, you feel worse, we'll pull back. It's never fun from a researcher's point of view to have that much flexibility in schedule, but clinically it's what works. And so I think what we're looking to see is starting maybe that neuromuscular training late in that return to play protocol, but then really following that person out. And so when you're clear for full return, that's not the end of your rehab program. Just like with an ankle sprain, just because we can tape your new play today doesn't mean you're fully healed. It means you're healed enough to play today. We can discuss whether or not that's actually the best in the athletes long term. Maybe that wasn't. But, from a concussion point of view, they go through the protocol. They're out, it used to be concussions, you're out 3 to 5, maybe 7 days. Now we're looking at 2 to 3 weeks being the norm. And you get back from that. And when you pass everything clinically and medically, you get physician clearance, you're not done. And this is where we've gone stuff in neuromuscular training. And this is what that study of Colorado, David Howell did was really great, was the athletes were fit to return to play,
right,
and they kept coming in for a few more months,
exactly,
and doing rehab protocols. And then they were the ones who didn't get hurt.
And again, the application of your work and the work that's being done in concussion, the year after concussion, we can still experience deficits, right? So this is critical. And I love that you can capture this, doing the research, being on the ground with the NCAA athletes and across, getting this out globally for people to hear. We hope plenty.
The NCAA DoD CARE consortium, we have 60-ish thousand baseline tests. We have about 6,000 or 7,000 concussions. It's across different levels of colleges, across military academies, and it's a wealth of data. There's already great work that's come out of it. There'll be more great papers coming out of it still from it. I think it's changing. As research used to be, if you had 15 or 20 concussions in a study, you were gold.
Right.
And now we have thousands in some of these studies. So it's really, we hope people are reading those studies and that they're helping influence clinical practice.
Absolutely. And you're on the ground with it, and you're delivering things that are going to be appreciated and utilized on various levels. One point I just want to drive home, because this is a bit of maybe not a pet peeve, but something that I'm certainly interested in, is this idea of emphasizing exposure and recovery, respecting the fact that the brain has been injured or there is a systemic injury when there is concussion. Yes, we need to respect that. But at the same time, this idea of exposing the brain to something, getting far away from that cave theory, a little bit of movement, but it's the science of it for sure that provides the framework, but then the artistry around the application, right? In terms of how much to do, when to do it. It's about knowing the athlete. If you know the history, if this person has been concussed or not, that should lead you to maybe spending a little bit more time with an NMT, or looking at, gait a little bit further than you would with somebody who hadn't been concussed. Is that a fair sort of statement to make?
Absolutely. I go back to my clinical days, there was the athlete you knew they're not coming to you until the bone's sticking out.
Right.
And then there's the athlete coming to you with, oh my God, my life's ending at the hang. And we have our athletes that have a wide range between there. So you talk about that substance, and that substance and threshold exercise is contingent upon the athlete telling you when the symptoms come up.
Right.
And so we all know that this kid or that kid who's just, they're not going to tell you. And so, yes, you have to know your athletes, you got to treat them accordingly. I think that's where athletic trainers and athletic therapists are such a big advantage of a lot of the healthcare professionals, is we know our athletes so much better, because basketball athletic trainers got 15 student athletes working, and that's all they got.
Right.
And they know those kids. And where even great physicians and great physical therapists have hundreds, if not thousands of patients coming through over a period of time, you don't have the same opportunity. And even though you may be a phenomenal physical therapist, you see too many people every day, every couple of days.
Right.
Where the athletic trainer, the athletic therapist, the hockey team is 20, 25 guys or girls. And you know them, you know who's being honest, you know who's underreacting, you know who's overreacting. So yeah, definitely that ability is critical, because it is absolutely medicine. Athletic therapy is an art as much as it is.
Absolutely. And I love hearing that in the research, and that being a reality in that space as well, in academia and practicality. So again, we'll wrap this up rather quickly. I would love to have you back on here again. We are now officially the podcast for WFATT. We're here in Winnipeg, Manitoba in Canada at the World Congress. Dr. Thomas Buckley at University of Delaware. Amazing work. Keep it up. I look forward to hearing your presentation and then being in touch in the future. Hopefully we can do this over a longer chat and discussion. Anything you want to conclude with in terms of your research or in terms of this Congress, the opportunity that is presented through conferences like these?
Just one major disappointment, the Winnipeg Jets are not in the playoffs. I was really looking forward to going to Jets home playoff game here, dress all in white for a whiteout. And I have a former student who lives up here in Winnipeg. She promised me to be in playoffs this year. So
a tough one for them, and rather disappointing, and maybe a little bit soft. Tread softly with that one around here, but I really appreciate your time, and
thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Yeah, look forward to your presentation. So again, it's Let's Chat. We are now the official podcast of WFATT. And we look forward to delivering more and more content from in here live in the exhibit hall in Winnipeg, Manitoba, World Congress 2022. Thank you so much. Talk soon.
Thanks again for being here. Thanks for listening. Thanks for being a part of this community. Check us out online, firststartherapy.com. That's FIRSTAR therapy.com. Or email us with feedback, consult@firststartherapy.com. CONSULT@firststartherapy.com. On Instagram @firststar.therapy, and our podcast host @letschat.at. This is First Star Let's Chat, an athletic therapy podcast.